Today, I'll tell you a story so powerful it reminds us that even in the darkest times, hope can still breathe. Set across the wide, silent plains of the American West. It was a world shaped by fear and rigid rules, where a woman's life could be traded without her consent. But everything changed with one quiet moment, when a frightened girl chose to run instead of surrender, never knowing her courage would awaken a destiny she never believed she deserved. Before we begin this journey, hit like and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The sun hung low and unforgiving above the open plain, washing the land in scorched gold and rust-red light. Nyra Cade's bare feet tore against the hardened soil, blood seeping between her toes and staining the brittle prairie stalks beneath her steps. Her dress, once pale and clean, clung in shredded strips around her bruised legs, darkened with dust and sweat. She had been running since long before sunrise, slipping from the cabin while the house still slept, and her father's drunken breathing rattled the thin wooden walls. Behind her lay Dry Creek Crossing, a town whose name promised mercy it had never once delivered. There was no redemption there, only silence that hid cruelty. Not in the church, where men preached obedience while their eyes strayed where they did not belong. Not in her father's home, where she had been traded like property. Blaine Holt had promised her to Carter Wine, the blacksmith, an iron-fisted man whose temper burned hotter than his forge, whose breath reeked of whiskey, whose patience snapped without warning. The wedding was meant to be tomorrow, or perhaps today. Time had dissolved in her panic. Nyra forced herself onward, though her legs trembled violently and her throat felt scorched raw. The frontier stretched endlessly ahead, wide, merciless, uncaring. A hawk wheeled above her, its shadow sliding across the grass like a silent witness. She knew the dangers that waited out here. Wolves, rattlesnakes, heat that could kill as quickly as a bullet. Yet none of it frightened her as much as what waited behind her. Then the wind shifted. Sagebrush filled the air, and beneath it, something else. Leather. Horse sweat. Nyra's heart lurched painfully. They had found her. She stumbled and collapsed to her knees, hands sinking into the rough earth. She twisted around in terror, but the horizon remained empty, a trembling line where land met sky. Then she heard it. Hoofbeats, not behind her, from the north. A lone rider appeared atop a distant rise, his silhouette cut sharp against the afternoon sun. Nyra's breath caught in her chest. The man sat tall in the saddle, moving with his horse as if the two shared one pulse, an ease born only from years of riding. As he drew nearer, details emerged. Long black hair loose in the wind, a leather shirt marked with careful stitching, shoulders held with quiet authority. An Apache warrior. Nyra's chest tightened. In Dry Creek Crossing, people spoke of Apaches in hushed, fearful tones, stories of raids, disappearances, monsters without mercy. They spoke of them the way people speak of demons. Yet something about this man made her stay still. Maybe it was exhaustion, maybe instinct, something deeper than fear. His paint mare slowed, muscles gleaming beneath brown and white markings. The horse looked strong, well cared for. He reined in nearly 20 feet away and studied her with eyes as dark and steady as deep water. Nyra waited for him to reach for the rifle across his back, or the blade at his side. Instead, he lifted one hand slowly, palm open, a sign of peace. "You're hurt," he said in careful English. His voice was low, controlled, carrying only the faintest trace of an accent. Nyra tried to answer, but only a dry rasp escaped her throat. The world tilted. Black shadows crept at the edges of her sight. The warrior dismounted in one smooth motion. He was taller than she expected. lean, powerful, moving with the quiet precision of a mountain hunter. From his saddlebag, he pulled a water skin and approached slowly, the way one would near a wounded animal. He knelt and held it out. Nyra's hands trembled as she drank. The water was warm but clean, life itself. She swallowed desperately until he gently pulled it back. "Slow," he warned. "Too much will make you sick." Up close, she saw he was younger than she'd imagined, perhaps 30 winters. Sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw, a thin scar traced from his eyebrow into his hairline. But what struck her most was his gaze. There was no hunger in it, no entitlement, no cruelty, only fatigue and something else. A quiet assessment, as though he were reading the truth written in her torn clothes and bleeding feet. "Please," Nyra whispered at last. "I can't go back. I can't." He studied her for a long moment, then looked toward the land she had fled. His expression tightened slightly. "Men follow." Tears spilled down her dust-streaked face as she nodded. "My father. Others. They'll make me." Her voice broke. The warrior rose and scanned the horizon with trained eyes. Whatever he saw, or didn't, seemed to settle something within him. He returned to his horse and pulled out a blanket and several strips of soft leather. "Feet first," he said quietly, kneeling again. Nyra hesitated, then obeyed. He cleaned her wounds with practiced care, his hands gentle yet sure, hands that had tended many injuries before. She flinched at first, unused to touch that did not carry pain. Slowly, her body eased as he worked. "My name is Zyrn," he said, as he wrapped the leather around her feet. "My mother was white, taken when she was young. She chose to stay with my father's people. She taught me your language." He glanced up briefly. "What do they call you?" Nyra swallowed. "Nyra," she whispered. "Nyra Cade." "Nyra," he repeated softly, as if weighing the sound. Then he asked, "Where are you running to, Nyra Cade?" She had no answer, only the open land ahead, and the faint, dangerous hope that somewhere beyond it she might finally be free. The question had been clawing at Nyra Cade's thoughts ever since she'd slipped from her father's house before dawn. Where could a woman alone possibly go in a land this wide and merciless? She had no money, no kin left worth claiming, no skills beyond keeping quiet and learning how to stay out of her father's reach. "I don't know," she admitted hoarsely. "Anywhere. Just away." Zyrn finished binding her feet and settled back on his heels. The sun was sinking low now, spilling amber light across his skin. He seemed distant for a moment, caught in some private weighing of fate, deciding something far greater than whether to help her or leave her behind. "Dark comes soon," he said at last. "Coyotes hunt at night." He paused. "Men, too." He rose and held out his hand. "Come." Nyra stared at him, at that open palm. Every lesson she had ever been taught screamed inside her, savage, heathen, dangerous. Yet those same voices had also told her to obey, to submit, to marry the man chosen for her and accept her suffering as God's will. Those voices had led her here, barefoot, bleeding, alone beneath an uncaring sky. She placed her hand in his. Zyrn lifted her with surprising ease, steadying her when her knees buckled. His touch was careful, restrained. He wrapped the blanket around her shoulders, then lifted her onto the horse as if she weighed nothing at all. Her body tensed automatically. She waited for him to climb up behind her, to press too close, the way men back in Dry Creek Crossing always did. But he didn't. Instead, Zyrn took the reins and began walking beside the mare, guiding them north toward a distant line of cottonwoods marking a hidden stream. They traveled in silence as the sun dipped below the horizon, setting the land aflame in reds and copper. Nyra clutched the blanket tighter, struck by how different this felt from every other moment she had ever spent near a man. Zairn walked with steady purpose, glancing back now and then to be sure she hadn't slipped, but never with that look she knew too well. The look that turned her into prey. As twilight deepened, they reached the cottonwoods. A narrow stream murmured between the roots, and nearby stood a small shelter made from bent saplings and stretched hide. Zairn helped her down, his touch brief, respectful. "Rest," he said, gesturing toward the shelter. "I make fire." Nyra limped inside and collapsed gratefully onto the buffalo robe laid across the ground. Through the opening, she watched him tend first to his horse, removing the saddle, brushing the mare with slow, practiced strokes. Only when the animal was settled did he gather wood. The quiet simplicity of it, of a man performing ordinary tasks as night fell, tightened something painfully in Nyra's chest. When had darkness ever meant safety to her? Soon, a small fire flickered to life, shadows dancing along the cottonwood trunks. Zairn disappeared briefly and returned with fresh water from the stream. He placed a small pot over the flames, adding dried meat and roots from his pack. "Eat," he said, "then sleep." He sat cross-legged across from her, the fire between them. "Tomorrow we go to Stonewind Camp, my people's camp. The women will give you clothes, better for traveling." Fear crept back into Nyra's voice. "But I'm white, won't they?" "My mother was white," he said calmly. "Now she is Apache. Blood does not make family." Nyra pulled the blanket closer. "I can't belong to anyone. I won't be owned again." For the first time, the edge of something like a smile touched his face. "Apache women are not owned," Zairn said. "They choose their path. They choose their husband." He stirred the pot slowly. "If they wish to leave, they place a man's things outside the wickiup. That is enough." Nyra stared at the fire, hardly believing such words could be true. "You would learn our ways," he continued. "Heal, then choose what you want." "And if men come looking?" she asked quietly. His expression hardened. "Then they learn this," he said. "Apache protect those under their care." There was no threat in his voice, no pride, only certainty. Something burned behind Nyra's eyes, protection without ownership, strength without cruelty. She had believed such things existed only in the bedtime stories her mother once whispered before fever stole her away. They ate in silence, the simple stew warming her from the inside out. Sleep tugged at her, though she resisted it. Years of fear had trained her never to rest fully. "Sleep," Zairn said gently. "You'll stay awake?" "All night." And so Nyra Cade, who had not slept peacefully in years, curled beneath buffalo robes inside a shelter of wood and hide. Outside, an Apache warrior sat motionless by the fire. The prairie sang around them, coyotes calling, owls gliding through darkness, wind whispering through the grass. But for the first time she could remember, those sounds did not frighten her. She slept. She did not dream of Carter Wine's hands, or Blaine Holt's fury, or the wedding waiting back in Dry Creek Crossing. She dreamed instead of running, but not away, toward something unnamed, distant, and quietly hopeful. Waiting somewhere beyond the horizon. Nyra awoke to bird song and the faint crackle of dying embers. Panic surged through her chest. Where was she? Then memory returned. The flight, the warrior, the promise of safety. Through the shelter's opening, she saw Zairn still seated by the fire, his silhouette unchanged from the night before. as if he truly had kept watch until dawn. His silhouette had not shifted from the moment she'd drifted into sleep. Had he truly remained awake all night? When Nyra stirred, he turned at once. In the pale gray light of dawn, she could see the exhaustion etched into his eyes, yet his posture remained steady, alert, unbroken. "The stream is there," Zairn said quietly, pointing through the cottonwoods. "Clean yourself. I will not look." Nyra stepped out of the shelter, carefully testing her wrapped feet. Pain flared, but the leather bindings softened the worst of it. She limped toward the water, choosing a spot hidden behind a fallen log. The cold stole her breath the moment she knelt. Still, she washed away the dust, the dried blood, the smell of fear clinging to her skin. She tried not to think about how exposed she was, alone, unclothed, miles from any town. When she returned, Zairn had laid several items upon a blanket. A soft leather dress worn smooth with age, a pair of moccasins, and narrow cloth strips for her hair. "My sisters," he explained simply. "They have many. They will not mind." Nyra lifted the dress with careful fingers, tracing the beadwork stitched along the hem. It was finer than anything she had ever owned. Though it was Apache clothing, she retreated into the shelter to change. When she emerged, she scarcely recognized herself. The dress fell to her calves, modest yet light, allowing a freedom of movement she had never known beneath stiff cotton and tight seams. "Better," Zairn said. She thought she heard approval beneath the single word. He had already packed the shelter, securing their belongings with practiced efficiency onto his calm mare. "Can you ride?" he asked. "A little," Nyra admitted. Her father had owned a plow horse once, though she had rarely been permitted to mount it. "Good. Today we share the horse. Stonewind Camp is 1 day's ride. Maybe more, with rest." He helped her into the saddle, then climbed up behind her. Nyra stiffened immediately, waiting for hands to roam, for his body to press against her the way men in Dry Creek Crossing always had. But he kept distance. Only one hand touched her waist briefly, steadying her when the mare shifted. Nothing more. They rode north as the sun climbed, pale gold spilling across the land. There was no visible trail, yet Zairn never hesitated. The grasslands slowly gave way to low hills scattered with juniper and pine. He stopped often, checking behind them, offering her water, allowing her legs to rest. During one pause beneath the shade of a massive boulder, Nyra finally spoke the question burning inside her. "Why are you helping me?" He remained silent so long she thought he might not answer. At last he spoke without turning his head, eyes fixed on the horizon. "My mother ran too," he said. "When she was young, a trapper found her, took her to a fort. Soldiers were there." He paused, choosing each word carefully. They did not help. They sent her back to the man who hurt her. Nyra's chest tightened. "She ran again. In winter. My father's hunting party found her nearly frozen. She chose to stay with us," he continued, "learned our ways, found kindness she never knew among her own." "Is she still alive?" Nyra asked softly. "No. She died 5 winters past, but she lived free. She lived choosing her own path." He finally looked at her. "All people deserve that, to choose." They rode on. The land grew rougher, ravines cutting the earth, narrow valleys hidden between stone walls. As they traveled, Zairn began teaching her. "See there?" he said, nodding toward the ground. "Antelope tracks, fresh, maybe 1 hour." Then he pointed toward a pine trunk scarred with deep marks. "Bear, marking territory, old sign, safe." Nyra listened closely, realizing these lessons were being given freely. Knowledge meant to keep someone alive. When they stopped again, he showed her edible plants, prairie onions, choke cherries, wild turnips. He demonstrated how to dig carefully, preserving the root so it would grow again. "Everything has spirit," he said. "Take only what you need. Give thanks." It was the opposite of what she had been taught. Her father's rule had always been simple: take everything. Own what you can. Leave nothing behind. Nyra felt herself aching to learn this new way of seeing the world. As afternoon shadows stretched long, they entered a narrow valley tucked between two rising hills. Zairn suddenly lifted his hand. The horse halted. His entire body changed. Coiled, alert, sharp as a hunting wolf. "What is it?" Nyra whispered. "Smoke," he said. "Not cook fire, wrong smell." He dismounted silently and helped her down. "Wait here. Stay with horse." Nyra shook her head at once. She had learned what happened to women who waited helplessly. "I'm coming." He studied her face, then nodded once. Together they moved uphill, using juniper brush for cover. Near the crest, Zairn dropped flat and motioned for her to do the same. They peered over the ridge. Below them lay the burned remains of a wagon. Smoke still drifted upward. Nyra clamped a hand over her mouth as her breath caught. Two bodies lay beside the wreckage. A man and a woman. Settlers. Arrows protruded from their backs. "Crow," Zairn muttered under his breath, studying signs Nyra could not read. His gaze moved across the scorched earth and broken grass. "War party, maybe 6, 7, passed through 2 hours ago. No more. Are they still close?" Nyra whispered. "No," he replied. "They took horses, supplies, headed east." His jaw tightened. "This is why I must bring you to my people quickly. Crow and Apache are enemies." He glanced at her. They would not be gentle with a white woman traveling beside an Apache warrior. They retreated carefully back towards the horse. Zairn altered their course at once, guiding them higher into the hills along narrow paths Nyra would never have noticed, routes that looked impossible until they were already upon them. Only then did she begin to understand the true danger surrounding her. Not only her father, not only the Dry Creek men, but the tangled web of tribal rivalries and old bloodshed she barely understood. As dusk crept across the land, they reached a sheltered hollow, this time a shallow cave carved into stone. Deep enough to conceal a small fire, yet open enough to watch the valley below. Zairn moved quickly, efficiently, every motion alert. "We cannot reach Stonewind Camp tonight," he said. "Too dark. Too dangerous. We rest here. Leave at first light." Nyra helped gather wood, feeling a quiet swell of pride when he nodded at her careful selection of dry branches that would burn with little smoke. They sat beside the small fire, sharing dried meat and pemmican from his pack. The flames flickered low, casting warm light across the stone walls. Questions pressed against Nyra's chest. "Your sister's dress," she said finally. "Won't she mind you giving it to a stranger? A white woman?" Zairn shook his head. "Nelly will be glad. She says I think too much of old hurts." A faint shadow of a smile touched his lips. "She says the world needs proof that goodness still walks in it. Helping you will make her believe again." "Old hurts," Nyra repeated softly. His hand drifted unconsciously to his side. Only then did she notice the faint outline of a scar beneath his shirt. "I had a wife once," he said quietly. "Winter Dove. She was killed 4 summers past. Cavalry came without warning." Nyra's breath caught. "They attacked at dawn," he continued. "Shot into wickiups. Women, children. It did not matter." "I'm sorry," Nyra whispered. Your sorrow cannot change the past, he said gently. But you remind me. Not all white people are soldiers. He added another stick to the fire. Some are only people, hurt, running, needing help. My mother taught me that. His voice softened. I forgot after my grief. Silence settled between them, comfortable, unforced. Nyra noticed how he positioned himself closer to the cave opening, his body angled protectively, casual yet deliberate. When had she last felt guarded rather than guarded against? Tomorrow, he said at last, we reach my people before the sun climbs high. You will be safe there. And you? Nyra asked. What will your people say when you bring a white woman into camp? Some will object, he admitted. But my uncle, Urek, leads the council. He remembers my mother, how she came frightened, as you did, how she became sister and daughter to us. He will speak for you. He met her eyes across the fire. Do not fear, I will not leave you alone among strangers. The promise was simple. No demand, no expectation of gratitude. It nearly unraveled her. In Nyra's world, protection had always carried a price. Obedience, silence, ownership. Yet this warrior asked for nothing except that she live and choose. I don't know how to thank you, she whispered. Live free, Zairn replied. That is thanks enough. As the fire burned low, he began to sing softly in his own language, a low, steady chant that drifted through the cave like smoke. Nyra did not understand the words, but she felt their meaning. A prayer, a warning, a shield against the dark. She fell asleep to that ancient melody, knowing for the second night in a row the unfamiliar comfort of safety. Outside, the wilderness still breathed danger. Wolves, bears, crow war parties, and the pursuit she knew would come from Dry Creek Crossing. But within the circle of firelight, beneath the watch of this unlikely protector, Nyra Cade began to believe she might survive long enough to face whatever choices tomorrow would demand. The last sound she heard before sleep claimed her was Zairn feeding the fire, ensuring the light would last until dawn. A warrior's vigil, freely given. As the days that followed blurred together in a rhythm of travel and learning, Nyra came to understand what honor truly looked like. True to his word, Zairn brought her safely to Stonewind Camp. She was met with curiosity, but not cruelty. Urek listened in silence as her story was told, his expression grave. When she finished, he granted her sanctuary without hesitation. As autumn brushed the hills in gold and rust, Nyra found herself adjusting to a life she could never have imagined. No, like this, Nayli laughed, watching her struggle with a deer hide. Too much pressure and you tear it. Too little and the fur stays. She guided Nyra's hands patiently. Here, feel. Zairn's sister had been delighted to have another woman near her age in camp, especially one whose early efforts provided endless amusement. I'm hopeless, Nyra sighed, sinking back on her heels. Nayli smiled warmly. You learn. When I was little, I ruined more hides than I can count, Nayli said with a laugh. My mother made me practice on the old ones until my hands learned what my eyes could not. Across Stonewind Camp, Nyra could see Zairn working with the younger boys. He moved among them with calm authority, teaching them how to string their bows, correcting grips, guiding their pulls, demonstrating the proper draw. Every so often, he glanced her way. Each time, she quickly returned to her work, warmth creeping into her face. The days had fallen into a rhythm. Mornings were spent with the women, learning the endless tasks that kept the camp alive. Hide scraping, pounding, cooking, gathering. By afternoon, Zairn would find her for lessons meant not for comfort, but for survival. Today we track, he said one afternoon, appearing beside the shelter where she worked. Come, Nyra set aside her mallet, another skill she was slowly mastering, and followed him. They walked beyond the camp into a quiet stand of aspens, their leaves whispering secrets as the breeze passed through. "What do you see?" Zairn asked, pointing to the ground. Nyra studied the soil carefully, recalling his earlier lessons. "Deer tracks," she said slowly, "but different sizes." He nodded. "Good. What else?" She knelt, peering closer. "The smaller prints are inside the larger ones, a fawn following its mother." His approving nod filled her with unreasonable pride. "Yes. How long ago?" This was harder. She touched the pressed earth, feeling the cool dampness beneath her fingers. "Recent," she said. "The edges are still sharp. Maybe 2 hours. Good eyes." He showed her snapped twigs, displaced leaves, the quiet language of movement written into the land. "Why is this important?" he asked. "To find game?" "Yes, but also to know who walks your land. Animal, human, friend, enemy. All leave signs." They spent the afternoon following the deer's trail without any intention of hunting, simply reading the story the earth had written. Zairn taught differently than anyone Nyra had ever known. He never raised his voice, never showed frustration when she missed what now seemed obvious, and when she succeeded, his quiet approval meant more than praise ever could. As they turned back toward camp, they reached a creek swollen from recent rain. The crossing they had used before had become a rushing, foaming current. "We go upstream," Zairn decided. But even after walking a long distance, they found no safer place. "I can wade across," Nyra offered, though the water looked cold and fast. He studied the current. Then her. "No," he said. "Too dangerous. I carry you." Before she could object, he lifted her easily, one arm beneath her knees, the other supporting her back. Nyra stiffened at once. Memories surged, other hands, other men, never meaning safety. "Breathe," Zairn said softly. "I am not moving. I will not hurt you." She forced herself to relax, to trust. He stepped into the stream. Water rushed around his legs, soaking his leggings. Halfway across, his foot slipped on a hidden stone. But he recovered instantly, pulling her closer to steady himself. For one brief moment, she was pressed against his chest. She felt his heartbeat. Strong, even. His hold was protective, not possessive. When they reached the far bank, he set her down gently. Nyra found herself slow to step away. "Thank you," she said, her voice unsteady. Something flickered in his dark eyes, then vanished. "Come," he said quietly. "Camp is close." That evening, as Nyra helped serve the communal meal, she overheard 2 warriors speaking nearby. "Zairn spends much time with the white woman," one said, unaware she now understood enough of their words. "He remembers his mother," the other replied, "and perhaps it is time he looks beyond his grief for Winter Dove." Nyra kept her expression calm, though her hands trembled as she ladled stew. Later, sitting beside Nayli near their shelter, she couldn't keep the question inside. "Your brother? He truly loved his wife?" Nayli's expression softened. "Like the sun loves the sky. When she died, I feared he would follow her into the spirit world. For 2 seasons he walked like a ghost. Only duty kept him among us." Then she gave Nyra a knowing look. "Now he teaches a white woman to track deer, carries her across rivers. The women talk, you know. They say he smiles again, sometimes." Heat rushed to Nyra's cheeks. "He's only being kind," she said quickly. "He promised to keep me safe." "My brother does not make promises lightly," Nayli replied gently. "But safety and kindness alone do not make a warrior sing again when he thinks no one listens." That night, unable to sleep, Nyra walked to the edge of Stonewind Camp, where the stars filled the sky. The vast prairie above her felt endless, so different from the low ceiling of her father's house. For the first time in her life, the open night did not feel like a threat. It felt like possibility. Nyra wasn't surprised when she heard soft footsteps behind her. "Cannot sleep?" Zairn asked quietly as he came to stand beside her. "Too many thoughts," she admitted. They stood shoulder to shoulder, gazing upward as the stars turned slowly across the endless sky. The night felt vast, alive, breathing. After a long while, he spoke. "You are different now. Stronger." "I'm learning," Nyra said softly, "but I'll never truly be Apache." He shook his head gently and touched his chest. "Being Apache is here. Not only blood." She glanced at him. "You work hard. You respect our ways. The people see this." Then the question escaped her before she could stop herself. "What do you see?" He remained silent so long she feared she'd crossed a line. Finally, he said, "I see a woman who chose fear over surrender." His voice was calm, steady. "A woman who grows stronger each day, who makes my sister laugh, who helps the elders without being asked." He paused. "I see someone I am glad I found that day on the prairie." Nyra's heart began to race. In her old life, words like those were always followed by expectation, by demands, by hands that took what they wanted. But Zairn did nothing. He simply stood there, honoring the space between them, letting his words stand on their own. "I dream sometimes," she confessed, "that my father finds me, that he drags me back." "Then he would face me," Zairn said simply, "and all my people. You are under our protection now." "I don't want to bring trouble to your camp," she whispered. He turned fully toward her then, his expression firm beneath the starlight. "Trouble comes whether we invite it or not. But a life without honor, without protecting those who need protection, that is no life at all." A chill wind swept across the prairie, and Nyra shivered. Without hesitation, Zairn removed his blanket and draped it around her shoulders. His hands rested briefly on her arms, warm, steady. "Come," he said. "The night grows cold." As they walked back toward Stonewind Camp, wrapped in his blanket, Nyra felt something shifting deep inside her. The fear that had ruled her for so long was loosening its grip, slowly giving way to something unfamiliar. Not love, not yet, but the possibility of it. The understanding that strength could be gentle, that protection could be freely given, that a man's honor could be shelter rather than cage. She thought of the woman she had been only weeks earlier, bleeding on the prairie, ready to accept death over captivity. That woman could never have imagined this, walking safely through darkness beside a warrior who had shown her more respect in weeks than she'd known in a lifetime. "Zairn," she said quietly as they reached the edge of camp. He stopped and looked at her with those deep, patient eyes. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." He inclined his head slightly. "You give thanks too often. I do only what is right." Yet as Nyra made her way toward Nayli's shelter, still wrapped in his blanket scented with sage and wood smoke, she knew it was more than that. In choosing to help her, to teach her, to stand between her and harm without asking anything in return, Zairn had shown her something she never believed existed. That good men still walked the world. Men who understood true strength wasn't found in taking, but in protecting. Sleep came easily that night, wrapped in his blanket, comforted by the knowledge that somewhere nearby he kept watch as he always did. The stars turned overhead. The prairie winds sang their ancient songs, and Nyra Cade continued her journey from fear toward trust, one careful step at a time. Morning arrived like any other. Frost silvered the grass. Smoke curled from waking fires. Stonewind Camp stirred to life. Nyra was helping Nayli prepare the morning meal when the dogs began barking. Not the friendly warning bark, but the sharp, furious sound meant only for strangers. Zairn appeared at her side so suddenly she hadn't seen him approach. His hand rested on the hilt of his knife, his body coiled tight with readiness. "Stay near the shelter," he ordered. Then he moved toward the edge of camp where warriors were gathering. Before Nyra could follow, a voice cut through the morning air. "I know she's here. My daughter, Nyra Cade." Her blood turned to ice. She recognized that voice. Beyond the gathering crowd stood 5 mounted men. At their head sat Blaine Holt, his face flushed with drink and rage despite the early hour. Beside him rode Carter Wine, the blacksmith she had been meant to marry, his massive frame making his horse seem small beneath him. 3 other men from Dry Creek Crossing flanked them. The Dry Creek men had come, and her past had finally found her. They were all armed. Every one of them wore the hard, righteous faces of men who believed God stood at their backs. From the largest wickiup near the center of Stonewind Camp, Urek emerged, straight-backed, calm, his presence commanding despite the early intrusion. The morning light caught the silver in his hair as he stepped forward. Zairn stood at his right side, translating as the elder spoke. "Why do men from Dry Creek Crossing come armed into a peaceful camp?" Blaine Holt spat tobacco juice into the dust, deliberately close to where Urek stood. "We're here for stolen property," he growled. He jabbed a finger straight at Nyra, who had stepped from behind the women despite Zairn's warning. "That woman is my daughter. She was taken by your savage." "I was not taken." Nyra's voice rang out before anyone could stop her. She moved forward, her hands trembling, but her spine unbent. "I ran," she said. "I chose to leave." Carter Wine barked out an ugly laugh. "Women don't choose, girl. You belong to your father until you belong to me. That's the law. Your law holds no power here," Zairn said coldly. Blaine Holt's hand slid toward his pistol. "Boy," he snarled, "you'll hand her over." He never finished the threat. Zairn's knife appeared in his hand in one smooth motion, the blade flashing in the morning sun. All around them, Apache warriors raised their bows with practiced calm, arrows sliding into place as one. "You are 5, Zairn said evenly. "We are many. And you threaten those under our protection." "Protection?" Carter Wine sneered. "She's a white woman living among savages. It's a Christian duty to save her from defilement." Nyra felt heat surge through her chest, anger burning away fear. "The only defilement I ever knew," she said sharply, "was in your Christian town." Every head turned toward her. "These people have shown me more kindness and respect than I ever received from my own." Blaine Holt's face darkened, swelling red with fury. "You ungrateful witch! After everything I did for you—" "You beat me!" Nyra shouted, the words bursting free. "You sold me to him." She pointed directly at Carter Wine. "Like I was cattle. I've seen the bruises he leaves on his horses. I know what he would have done to me." "Discipline," Blaine Holt snarled. "It's what you needed, what you've always needed." Urek raised one hand. Silence fell. When he spoke, Zairn's voice carried the elder's authority across the camp. "The woman came to us seeking sanctuary. She has worked beside our people, learned our ways. She stays by her own choosing, not by force. This is the Apache way. Every person chooses their own path." "I don't give a damn about your ways," Blaine Holt shouted. She's coming with us, now." He dismounted and strode toward Nyra. Zairn moved instantly to block him. But Nyra stepped forward first. "No." The single word stopped her father cold. He stared at her, stunned. She had never defied him openly before. "No," she said again, louder. "I will not go. You have no power over me here. I'm your father." "A father protects," Nyra replied. "A father cherishes." "You did neither." Her voice steadied with every word. "I choose to stay with people who understand honor." Blaine Holt's face twisted with rage. He lunged, his hand lifted to strike. But Zairn caught his wrist mid-air, locking it in place with effortless strength. "You will not touch her," Zairn said. Each word was precise, final. "Not here. Not ever again." For a breathless moment, the old world stood frozen against the new. Then Carter Wine made his fatal mistake. Seeing his promised bride defended by an Apache warrior, his fury boiled over. He drew his pistol. The snap of bowstring split the air. His hat flew from his head as an arrow sliced past close enough to part his hair. His horse reared violently, nearly throwing him. More arrows struck the ground at the animal's feet, forcing them to dance and snort in terror. Urek spoke calmly. Zairn translated. "The next arrows do not miss. Leave. Now." The wind moved through Stonewind Camp, carrying silence sharp as steel. And for the first time in her life, Nyra Cade stood free, not because she had been rescued, but because she had chosen. "Do not return." Blaine Holt tore free from Zairn's grip, stumbling back toward his horse. His face burned red with rage and humiliation. "This isn't finished," he spat. "I'll come back with the cavalry. They'll burn this whole camp to drag her home." "Then they will find nothing," Zairn replied calmly. "We move like the wind, white man. Your soldiers are slow, loud. We hear them coming long before they arrive." "You're declaring war on the United States," one of the men shouted. Nayli stepped forward then, her English careful, but strong. "We make war on no one," she said. "We protect a woman who asked for help. If that is a crime in your world, then your world is broken." The standoff stretched tight as a drawn bowstring. Nyra watched her father's eyes shift as he measured the odds. Even through the haze of drink, he could still count. 5 men, against more than 30 warriors, all with arrows raised. "Get on your horse," Blaine Holt snapped. Carter Wine growled in protest, his hand lingering on his pistol. "We'll handle this proper, through the law." As the men mounted, Blaine Holt locked eyes with Nyra one final time. "You're dead to me, girl. You hear? Dead. You chose these heathens over your own blood." Nyra lifted her chin. "I chose freedom over slavery," she said. "I chose respect over fear." "If that makes me dead to you, then I've been dead a long time already." The 5 riders wheeled their horses and galloped away, dust boiling behind them. The Apache warriors did not lower their bows until the men vanished beyond the horizon. When the crowd finally began to disperse, Nyra realized her hands were shaking. The fear arrived late, crashing in now that it was over. Zairn touched her elbow gently. "You were brave," he said. "I was terrified." "Courage is not the absence of fear," he replied. "It is acting despite it." He studied her face. "Your father will return." "I know." Nyra looked around the camp that had become her refuge. "I've brought danger to your people. Maybe I should leave." "No." The word came sharp, immediate. Zairn caught himself and softened his tone. "No. Running is finished. You stood today. Now you do not stand alone?" "We stand with you." Urek approached then, placing a weathered hand upon Nyra's shoulder. He spoke at length in Apache, his voice carrying quiet authority. Zairn translated. My uncle says you spoke with the heart of a warrior today. You claimed your freedom before all eyes, among our people. That is sacred. He gives you a name. Nyra's breath caught. Viaka Win, Zairn said, Feather Woman. For you have learned to fly free, like the eagle. Tears blurred Nyra's vision. A name, not forced upon her, chosen, earned. But Urek continued speaking, his tone grave. Even eagles must watch for hunters. Your father spoke of soldiers. We must prepare. The remainder of the day passed in motion. What had once felt permanent revealed its true nature. Stonewind Camp began to transform, wiki-ups coming down, supplies bundled, everything prepared for swift movement. By nightfall, the camp could vanish at a moment's notice. Zairn found Nyra as she helped Nayli pack their belongings. You did well today, he said quietly. But this is only the beginning. They'll come again, Nyra replied, with more men, more guns. I know. I'm sorry for bringing this trouble. Stop. His voice was firm. You bring no trouble. They bring trouble. He hesitated, searching for the right words. You bring life back to places that were dead. Before she could ask what he meant, a young warrior ran toward them, speaking urgently. Zairn's expression darkened. Scouts report soldiers, he said. 1 day's ride south. 20 men, maybe more. Nyra's stomach dropped. So soon. Her father must have ridden straight to the fort, spinning tales of kidnapped white women to stir the cavalry's sense of duty. What will we do? She asked. Zairn smiled then. Not gently, but like a warrior. The rare kind of smile that changed everything about his face. What Apache have always done, he said. We disappear. Let them chase ghosts across the prairie. That night, as Stonewind Camp prepared to move, Nyra worked beside the women with a new understanding. She was no longer merely learning how to survive. She was learning how to belong. Nyra felt it settling into her bones. She was no longer alone, no longer a stray drifting between dangers. She was part of something larger now, a people who placed freedom above comfort, dignity above fear. Her father believed he could cage her again. He did not understand. She had tasted independence. She had felt what it meant to be seen as a person, never as property. Above her, the stars burned bright and endless. Zairn came to walk beside her before the camp settled for the night. Are you afraid? He asked. Nyra thought for a moment. Yes, she admitted. But it's different now. Before, I feared the cage. Now I fear losing my freedom. He nodded slowly. It is a better fear, he said. One worth facing. Tomorrow we travel north, he continued, into the sacred hills. Soldiers do not follow there. Too many places to be watched, he said. Too easy to vanish. You will be safe. We will be safe, Nyra corrected softly. I'm not separate anymore. Your danger is mine. In the darkness, she felt his smile, rather than saw it. Viaka Win, he said quietly. Yes, you understand. As they stood beneath the vast prairie sky, Nyra knew the days ahead would test every scrap of courage she had found, but she would not face them alone. Behind her stood a people who believed freedom was worth any cost. Beside her stood a warrior who had taught her that strength and gentleness could live in the same heart. Let them come, she thought. They would not find the frightened girl who had fled Dry Creek Crossing. They would find Feather Woman, one who had learned how to fly. The fire burned low in the hidden valley, where they had made camp after 3 days of hard travel. Most of the band slept, exhausted from slipping through ravines and forests, while the fort ash riders followed like stubborn hounds, always a step behind. Nyra could not sleep. Wrapped in a buffalo robe, she watched the flames sink to embers. Zayern emerged from the darkness without a sound. He fed the fire, then settled across from her. "Your thoughts are heavy," he observed. She drew the robe tighter. "I keep thinking about the life I left behind," she said. "Sometimes it feels like a nightmare I've woken from." She hesitated. "And other times, I wonder if this is the dream." He nodded, understanding without surprise. "Change comes like a storm," he said. "Fast, powerful. It washes away what stood before." They listened to the night, the cry of an owl, the whisper of wind through pine branches, distant coyotes calling. At last, Nyra found the courage to speak what weighed on her most. "In my old world," she said slowly, "men and women lived by rules." She stared into the fire. A woman's body was treated like currency, guarded until it could be traded in marriage. Then it belonged to her husband, to use as he wished. Zayern's jaw tightened, but he did not interrupt. "My mother tried to prepare me," Nyra continued. "She told me to endure, that it would hurt at first, that it was normal, that men had needs, and wives had obligations." Her voice turned bitter. "She never said it could be different. Maybe she didn't know." Zayern spoke quietly. "Your mother lived in a cage. She taught you how to survive inside it. She could not teach what she had never been shown." Nyra finally lifted her eyes. "What do Apache women know?" He considered carefully. "They know their worth is not measured by suffering, but by who they are. They know their bodies belong to themselves, gifted by the Great Spirit. They know that joining with a man should bring joy, not pain." "Joy," Nyra repeated, the word strange on her tongue. "My mother once said," Zayern continued, "that white women are taught to fear what should be beautiful. Among our people, women carry power. They choose their husbands. They may leave them simply by placing his belongings outside the dwelling, and their pleasure," he added evenly, "matters as much as a man's." Heat rose to Nyra's cheeks, but she did not look away. "I've never heard anyone speak of a woman's pleasure," she said quietly, "because your people turned sacred things into shame." The fire whispered between them, and for the first time, Nyra Cade understood that freedom was not only about where she lived, but about who she was allowed to be. "They take what should be shared," Zayern said quietly, his voice edged with restrained anger, "and turn it into taking. That is why I swore you would never be harmed. I have seen what your world does to women," he continued. "It is wrong." The fire cracked, sparks lifting into the night sky. Nyra watched them rise and vanish. "Sometimes," she admitted, her voice barely more than breath, "when you help me down from your horse, or steady me while crossing a stream, I feel things." She hesitated. "And then fear comes, because I was taught that feeling always leads to pain." Zayern leaned forward slightly. "Fear is the enemy of joy," he said. "It makes the body rigid when it should be soft, closed when it should be open. That is why Apache mothers teach their daughters differently. They teach that desire is natural, like hunger or thirst, and that fulfillment is their right." "But how can they trust?" Nyra asked softly. "How can they be certain?" "Because Apache men are taught as well," he replied. "From boyhood, we learn that strength exists to protect, not to conquer. A woman's trust is a gift to be earned, not a prize to be seized. A man who causes harm in the marriage bed brings shame upon himself and his bloodline." Nyra absorbed his words slowly, trying to fit them into a life shaped by fear. Carter Wine used to say that women who enjoyed such things were wicked, she said. Broken. Zaire's reply was immediate. Then he is a fool, he said flatly, and a coward. Only weak men need women to be broken. Silence returned between them. Nyra felt as though she stood at the edge of a cliff, staring down at beliefs that had ruled her entire life. To question them felt dangerous, yet strangely freeing. I dream sometimes, she confessed. Not of my father, not of Carter. Different dreams, about possibility. But I wake ashamed. Shame is a chain your people placed upon you, Zaire said, and chains can be removed. How? He rose and crossed the fire, sitting beside her, but not touching, careful to leave space. By listening to your own heart. By learning that what you feel is not wicked. By knowing you always have the right to choose what happens to your body. Nyra studied his face in the firelight. Even if I chose never to cross that line, she asked, to always keep distance? Especially then, he said gently. I told you I would die before hurting you. That includes harming your spirit by pressing past your boundaries. But you are a man, she whispered. Don't you have needs? The word tasted bitter, heavy with old lessons. I have feelings, Zaire corrected. Desires. Yes, when you smile while learning, when you laugh with Nelly, when you stood unbroken before your father, I feel many things. But those feelings are mine to carry. They are not your burden. Tears gathered in Nyra's eyes. No man had ever told her that his desire was his responsibility. In my old life, she said slowly, I was taught to make myself small, quiet, to never want, only to be wanted. To never choose, only to be chosen. She gestured towards the sleeping camp. But here, I track deer, I tan hides, I speak my thoughts without punishment. I have a name I earned. You are becoming who you always were, Zaire said, not changing, uncovering. And if what I uncover frightens me? Then you face it with courage, he replied, as you have faced everything else. He paused. And you do not face it alone. Something shifted in Nyra's chest, like ice cracking beneath spring warmth. When you carried me across that flooded creek, she said, I felt safe. Not just from drowning. Safe from everything. I had never felt that with a man. That is as it should be, Zaire said softly. A man's arms should be sanctuary, not threat. Your wife, Winter Dove, Nyra said gently. She felt this safety? A sad smile touched his lips. Yes, she was fierce in her own way. Afraid of nothing. But in my arms, she could be soft. She once said it was like resting against the mountain, strong, steady, unchanging. You must miss her deeply. I do. But grief is not a cage either, he said. It is a season. It passes. He met Nyra's eyes. She would have liked you. She would have said you have the heart of a warrior struggling to breathe free. The fire had burned low again. Around them, the camp slept in peace, hidden deep within the valley. Tomorrow would bring more flight, more uncertainty. But tonight, Nyra felt something entirely new, the possibility of healing. I am afraid, she admitted, not of you. Of myself. Of discovering I am not who I was taught to be. Zaire rose, preparing to return to his watch. That is wisdom, he said quietly. Not weakness. Change requires courage. Then he added, before stepping into the darkness, remember this. Whatever you discover about yourself, Zaire said quietly, you remain under my protection. Whatever you choose, or choose not to choose, you are valued here. As he turned to leave, Nyra spoke softly behind him. "Zyrn." He paused. "Thank you," she said, her voice unsteady, "for seeing me as more than something to be owned, or fixed, or saved." He looked back at her, eyes calm and certain. "You were never broken," he said, "only caged. And cages, no matter how strong, cannot hold an eagle forever." Left alone beside the dying fire, Nyra sat with her thoughts. Their conversation had unlocked doors she had kept sealed her entire life. Beyond them waited possibilities she had never dared to imagine. That her body could belong to herself. That desire was not sin. That she had the right to feel, to want, to choose. The realization frightened her. It thrilled her. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, answered moments later by another. Even predators, she realized, called to their mates with tenderness. The natural world carried no shame, only connection. She thought of Zyrn's steady eyes, his careful distance, his promises that demanded nothing in return. How different it felt to be protected rather than possessed. When he had whispered, "I would die before hurting you," she understood now. He had not meant only the body. He meant her spirit. As the stars turned overhead and the fire sank to glowing coals, Nyra Cade, Feather Woman, felt the first stirring of what freedom truly meant. Not merely escape from her father's house or Carter Wine's fists, but release from the chains wrapped around her mind and heart. Tomorrow she would run again, fleeing the Fort Ash riders who hunted her like property. But tonight, she had taken the first steps on a different journey, toward healing, toward trust, toward the possibility that joy might exist where she had only known fear. The owl cried once more, and this time it sounded like a blessing. The storm struck without warning. Prairie storms always did. One moment the sky lay clear above them. The next, black clouds rolled in like an avalanche. Wind screamed through the canyon, rain slashing sideways in blinding sheets. The band had been traveling through a narrow pass when the deluge hit, turning the dry creek bed into a roaring river. "High ground!" Urek shouted, but the wind swallowed his command. Nyra clung to her horse as the water surged around its legs. Through the rain, she saw families scattering, women dragging children, warriors shouting directions, chaos tearing through the line. Then she heard it, a deep, rising thunder that was not the sky. "Flash flood!" Zyrn's voice cut through the storm. He was suddenly beside her, grabbing her horse's reins. "The canyon will fill! We must—" His words were drowned by shouts behind them. Through the curtain of rain, Nyra saw riders emerging at the canyon mouth. Fort Ash riders. They had followed them after all, using the storm as cover. "There!" a voice shouted over the wind. Nyra recognized it instantly. Carter Wine. The white woman. Everything happened at once. Water surged higher. Gunshots cracked. Zyrn's horse screamed and went down beneath him, pitching him into the torrent. Without thinking, Nyra threw herself from her own mount and plunged after him. The current struck like a living beast, hurling her against rocks, filling her mouth with mud and grit. But she had learned to swim once, long ago, in a creek near her childhood home, one of the few freedoms she had ever stolen for herself. She fought the water, gasping, searching. Then she saw him. Zyrn struggled to stay afloat, his left arm hanging useless. She grabbed his good arm and let the current shove them sideways toward a cluster of boulders. They slammed into stone and clawed their way upward, coughing and shaking as chaos raged below. The soldiers had dismounted, taking cover behind rocks, trading fire with Apache warriors who had reached higher ground. But the storm was the true enemy now. Nyra watched in horror as a wall of water tore through the canyon, sweeping away horses, packs, everything in its path. "Your arm!" she cried, seeing blood spreading through Zairn's soaked shirt. "Bullet grazed it," he said through clenched teeth. "I've had worse." His eyes scanned the canyon wall. "There," he said. "A deer trail." She followed his gaze. The path was steep, slick stone climbing almost straight up. "Can you climb?" Nyra nodded, though fear coiled in her stomach. Together they began the ascent, helping one another over wet rock and loose shale. Below them, the battle faltered, flood-forcing soldiers and warriors alike to choose survival over pursuit. They had climbed perhaps 50 feet when Nyra felt it, that sense of being watched. She looked up. Carter Wine stood above them on a narrow ledge, having found another route. Rain streaked his face, twisting his features into something feral, rage mixed with possession. "I've got you now, girl," he snarled, raising his rifle. Zairn moved instantly to shield her, but his injured arm slowed him, and the storm howled louder still. The rifle barrel swung toward them. Nyra did not think. Her hand closed around a jagged stone, and she hurled it with the same instinct Zairn had drilled into her during long days of hunting practice. The rock struck Carter Wine square in the temple. He cried out, his shot exploding harmlessly into the storm, and his boots slid on the slick stone beneath him. For one terrible instant he teetered at the edge, arms flailing wildly. Then he fell backward with a scream, vanishing into the churning flood below. Nyra stared at the place where he disappeared, breath locked in her chest, stunned by what her own hands had done. Zairn's good hand closed firmly around her shoulder. "You saved us," he said simply. "Come, we must keep moving." They climbed until her legs burned and her lungs screamed, reaching a shallow cave carved halfway into the canyon wall, just as strength finally abandoned them. Outside, the storm still raged, but the cave lay dry, sheltered from wind and rain. Zairn sank against the stone, his face pale, blood soaking through his sleeve. "Let me see," Nyra said sharply. She tore strips from her dress and pressed them to his wound. The bullet had ripped through muscle but missed bone and artery. Her hands moved with calm precision, skills Nayli had taught her during long evenings by the fire. "You are shaking," Zairn observed. "I killed him," Nyra whispered. "I killed a man." "You protected us," he said firmly. "There is no shame in that." "I thought I would feel guilt," she admitted. "But I don't. Does that make me wicked?" Zairn caught her hand with his uninjured one. "It makes you alive. He would have killed us both, then dragged you back into suffering. You chose life over death, freedom over captivity. The Great Spirit does not punish those who defend themselves." Outside, the storm began to weaken, though distant gunfire still echoed, mixed with shouts and the roar of retreating floodwaters. They were cut off, alone until the canyon emptied. "Our people," Nyra said quietly. "We have to help them." "We cannot until the water falls," Zairn replied. "They are strong. Most will have reached safety." Yet worry shadowed his eyes. As night settled, cold followed the storm. They huddled together for warmth, sharing breath and body heat. Nyra had never been this close to a man without fear. But Zairn's presence brought only steadiness. She felt his breathing, slow, labored, but calm. "I'm sorry," she murmured into the darkness. "For what?" "For all this. If they hadn't been chasing me—" "Stop," he said gently but firmly. "You did not make them cruel. You did not make them hunt. You only chose to live free. The consequences belong to them, not you." Silence wrapped around them as the storm faded into distant murmurs. Then Zairn spoke again, his voice low. "When the soldiers attacked our camp years ago," he said, I pulled Winterdove from our shelter. She was already gone. I held her as her spirit left this world, unable to save her. His arm tightened slightly around Nyra. Today, you pulled me from the water. You fought for my life. It heals something I believed would never mend. Nyra turned toward him in the dim cave light. You've saved me more times than I can count. And now, she said softly, we save each other. This is partnership, Zairn said. This is what your people never understood. Strength shared is strength doubled. Despite the storm, the battle, and the unknown fate of those they loved, peace settled inside Nyra's chest. She had fought for something precious, and won, not by endurance, not by submission, but by choice. Zairn, she said quietly, what happens when the water recedes? There will be more soldiers, more men like Carter Wine. Then we face them. He paused. Together. Then he added gently, unless you wish to leave. You could go east, begin again, where no one knows your name. The thought struck her like icy water. Leave, after everything? Is that what you want? She asked. No, he answered at once, too quickly, then softened. No, but I will not cage you with my wanting. You must choose freely. Nyra thought of the life she had fled, her father's house, the prison of Carter Wine's claims. Then she thought of the life she had found. Naeli's laughter, Urek's pride when he named her Feather Woman, the patience with which Zairn taught her to live. And most of all, this moment, a wounded warrior beside her who placed her freedom above his own desire. I choose to stay, she said firmly. This is my family now. You are my... She hesitated, searching. You are mine to protect, as I am yours to protect. If that brings danger, she finished, then we face it as one. In the darkness, she felt his smile before she saw it. Viaka Win, Zairn whispered. Feather Woman, my fierce eagle woman. They stayed awake through the long night, keeping watch, tending Zairn's wound, speaking softly to hold fear at bay for their people. When dawn finally came, painting the canyon walls in gold and ash, they were ready to face whatever waited below. The flood had withdrawn, leaving wreckage and silence in its wake. Broken branches, scattered packs, marks of loss. But as they descended carefully, hope revealed itself in the earth. Tracks climbing the canyon walls, signs of escape. Most of the band had survived. The Fort Ash Riders, it seemed, had fled when water proved more deadly than arrows. They found the others gathered on the plateau above the canyon, counting losses and tending the wounded. Naeli ran to them, tears streaking her face. We thought you were gone. Zairn managed a faint smile. When my horse went down, he said, my new sister turned into a fish. And into a warrior, he added softly. She saved my life twice in one day. As the story spread, how Nyra had dragged him from the flood, how she had struck down the man who would have killed them both, the way the people looked at her changed. She was no longer the rescued white woman learning their ways. She was Viaka Win, Feather Woman, one who had claimed her place with courage and blood. That night, when the band made camp in safer ground and mourned those lost, Nyra sat beside Zairn as Rune cleaned and stitched his wound. She held his hand, steady and unflinching, offering him the same strength he had once given her. No cage, she whispered when pain tightened his jaw. Not for either of us. Only bonds freely chosen. His fingers tightened around hers, and in that simple grasp lived a promise of all the days ahead. Dangerous, uncertain, but theirs to shape. The storm had passed. It left ruin behind, but it also left clarity. They had been tested by water and by cruelty. They were not unscarred, but they were unbroken. And most of all, they had endured together. The autumn moon hung full and bright above the valley, where the band settled into a more lasting camp. 3 moons had passed since the flood. Zyrn's arm had healed cleanly, leaving only a pale scar, a quiet reminder of the moment Nyra had saved them both. The threat of soldiers faded as winter crept closer. Few Fort Ash riders were willing to brave the plains for a woman who clearly did not wish to be rescued. Nyra sat outside the dwelling she still shared with Nayli, working carefully on a pair of winter moccasins. Her hands moved with confidence now. The beadwork forming beneath her fingers told a story. Water and storm, flight and shelter, paths that separated and returned again. "You have grown skilled," Nayli said, settling beside her. "Those are fine enough for a wedding gift." Nyra's hands stilled. "I'm making them for Zyrn," she said softly. His winter pair wore through. "Of course you are," Nayli replied with gentle teasing, just as he happened to need new arrow fletching last week, and a new knife sheath before that. She touched Nyra's cheek lightly. "Friends help one another." Nyra glanced up. "Friends?" Nayli laughed. "Is that what you call it when he watches you like sunrise? When you lose your words if he walks near?" Nyra bent over her beadwork, cheeks warming. Over the passing moons, something had changed. The careful distance Zyrn once kept had softened. Not crossed, but eased. A hand at her elbow to steady her. Sitting close during evening stories. The way his eyes found hers across the camp, holding meanings she was only beginning to understand. "My brother says," Nayli continued more quietly, "that among your people divorce is complicated. But what of the opposite? How does a woman show she chooses a man?" Nyra lifted her eyes, finding only kindness there. "I was taught that joining with a man meant pain," she admitted, "that it meant surrender." "But I've watched you," Nayli said gently, "and I no longer see fear when you look at him." It was true. Somewhere between learning to track deer and surviving the flood. Between silence shared and protection freely given, fear had transformed into something else. When Zyrn truly smiled, warmth spread through her chest. When he guided her hands during a lesson, she found herself wishing the moment would last. "Among our people," Nayli said softly, "a woman may show interest by preparing special food, by decorating a man's belongings, by choosing his company for quiet walks." She paused. "Or by making winter moccasins whose patterns speak of partnership." Nyra looked down at her work. Without realizing it, she had woven designs that joined and separated, crossed and returned, 2 paths moving together by choice. That evening, as the camp settled into night, Nyra found herself walking toward the grove where Zyrn often went to think. He stood with his back to her, watching stars rise above the hills. He turned when he sensed her. "Viaka Win," he said gently. "You should be by the fires. The night is cold." "I'm not cold," she replied, though autumn's bite lingered. She hesitated, then lifted the bundle in her hands. I finished these." The moonlight caught the beadwork as she held them out, and the wind went quiet. Nyra held out the moccasins, the moonlight catching on every careful bead stitched into the hide. Zyrn accepted them slowly. He turned them in his hands, studying the patterns with growing stillness. "These are finely made," he said at last, his voice thoughtful. "The design speaks of choice," Nyra said, her courage rising suddenly, fierce and unshakable. "Of paths that come together by will, not force, of partnership shaped by respect, never ownership." Zyrn set the moccasins aside with great care. Then he stepped closer. Still, he stopped just beyond arm's reach. He let her decide the space between them. "Nyra," he said, using her white name, the one he spoke only in moments of deep feeling. "You know my heart. You have known it for many moons. But I made vows," he continued quietly, "to never harm you, to die before bringing you pain." Nyra stepped forward, closing part of the distance. "You have kept those promises," she said. "But Zairn, I am not the terrified woman you found on the prairie anymore." She moved closer still. "I have faced floods and soldiers. I have taken a life to save yours. I found my strength." Another step. "Now I want to know what lies beyond fear." His breath caught. "Be certain," he said, his voice rougher than before. "I have waited. I can wait longer. I don't want you to wait." The words rushed out before doubt could stop them. "When you were wounded, when I thought I might lose you, I realized I'd been letting my past steal my future. Carter Wine is dead. My father believes me dead. But I am alive." She lifted her face to his. "For the first time in my life, truly alive. And I choose—" She didn't finish. Zairn closed the remaining distance, lifting one hand to her face, touching her as if she were something sacred. "What do you choose, Viaka Win?" "You," she whispered. "I choose you, not because I need protection anymore, but because I want partnership. Not because you saved me, but because you let me save myself." His thumb brushed her cheekbone. Nyra leaned into the touch, something that would have terrified her only moons before. "Among my people," Zairn said softly, "a man must court properly. He brings gifts to the woman's family. He proves himself worthy." "You've been courting me since the day we met," Nyra replied. "Every lesson, every moment of patience. Every time you saw me as a person instead of property. I need no horses or blankets to know your worth." "Your healing is still new," he said gently. "I would not rush you." Nyra raised her hand and mirrored his touch, resting her palm against his cheek. "Then don't rush," she said, "but don't hold back either. Show me what it means to be wanted without being consumed. Teach me, like you've taught me everything else." In the moonlight, his control finally fractured, not into hunger, not into demand, but into something far stronger, desire tempered by tenderness, passion bound by protection. He rested his forehead against hers. "I have loved you since the day you threw that stone," he admitted softly. "Fierce eagle woman who fights for what she claims. And I have loved you since you wrapped my feet by the stream," Nyra whispered. "Gentle warrior who gives without taking. I did not know love could exist without fear until you showed me." They stood there, sharing breath, heartbeats finding the same rhythm. Then Zairn drew back slightly, his eyes solemn. "If we join our paths," he said, "it must be done in the open. With honor. You deserve a proper wedding, witnesses to our choosing." Nyra smiled. "Nayli has been dropping hints for weeks." "My sister sees much," he said, a rare smile touching his lips. "Will you let me court you properly?" he asked. "At least for a few days." "Will there be more midnight walks?" she teased. "More reasons to sit close during stories?" "Many," he promised. "And I will wear your moccasins so all may see your claim upon me." "Good," Nyra said firmly, "because I find I'm rather possessive of what I choose freely." He laughed then, a rich, full sound she had rarely heard. "As am I," he said, "but like the eagle with the sky. Not to cage, but to soar together." They walked back toward camp hand in hand, an unremarkable gesture that carried more meaning than any vow. Warriors nodded in quiet approval. Women smiled knowingly. Naeli clapped her hands in delight. That night, Nyra lay beneath her buffalo robes, not aching for something forbidden, but waiting for something approaching. Outside, she could hear Zairn's voice among the men, likely enduring good-natured teasing about the moccasins he already wore. She thought of the girl she once had been, afraid of a man's touch, certain that closeness meant pain. And she knew, without doubt, that girl was gone. That girl, the one who believed love was only another word for ownership, still lived somewhere inside Nyra. She always would, but she no longer ruled her choices. Tomorrow Zairn would follow the old custom. A horse would be offered to mark the joining of their paths. Urek had agreed to stand in that role, having no need for horses himself, but understanding the meaning behind the gesture. There would be food, laughter, a celebration of two lives already so tightly woven it was difficult to tell where one ended and the other began. But tonight, Nyra held the truth quietly within her chest. She had chosen love over fear, trust over terror. Somewhere in the camp, an Apache warrior wore moccasins that spoke without words to anyone who could read the signs. This woman claims this man. This man honors this woman. These two walk together by choice. The full moon washed the valley in silver, and Nyra Cade, Viaka Win, finally understood what her mother had never been given the chance to learn. Love without choice was only another cage. But love freely given, freely received, was the purest freedom of all. Dawn broke gently across the prairie, spilling amber and rose across the grasslands. Nyra stood at the edge of camp, wrapped in the wedding blanket Zairn's grandmother had woven long before either of them were born. The ceremony had been simple, sacred. Urek's voice had carried across the fire as the people bore witness to their promise, to walk one road side by side. Now, as the camp stirred awake on the first morning of their married life, Nyra watched the sunrise with new eyes. Zairn emerged from their dwelling, their own now, raised by the community as a gift of belonging. He came to stand behind her, folding his arms around her, not to claim, but to shelter. "No regrets?" he asked softly, his breath warm near her ear. Nyra leaned back into him, surprised by how natural it felt. "Only that it took so long to find this." The night behind them had changed everything. True to every vow, Zairn had been patient beyond measure. Where she once expected pain, she found gentleness. Where she once feared demand, she found listening. For the first time, Nyra understood something her mother never had the chance to know: that closeness could be a conversation, not a conquest. "The scouts say the buffalo are moving south," Zairn said quietly. "The band will follow." "Then we go," Nyra replied, without hesitation. "Home isn't a place anymore. It's wherever we stand together." He turned her gently, studying her face in the morning light. "You've changed so much from the woman I found on the prairie." "No," she said with a small smile. "I've become who I always was, beneath the fear." "You didn't change me, Zairn. You gave me the space to change myself." Nayli's voice cut cheerfully across the camp. "Stop staring at the sunrise and come eat. Marriage doesn't excuse you from work." Laughing, they joined the others. Nyra moved through the familiar routines with something new in her step. Not uncertainty, but belonging. She was no longer a guest, no longer merely accepted. She was the wife of a respected warrior, a woman with her own place in the living web that bound the people together. As the camp prepared to move, Nyra worked alongside the women, helping lower shelters with practiced hands. She felt the glances of the elders, quiet, approving. This woman who had come as an outsider, who had endured flood and battle, who had brought light back to a man long wrapped in grief. "You are truly one of us now," Iska said gently as they worked. "Not by blood," Nyra replied, "but by choice." Iska nodded. "The strongest bonds always are." Nyra thought of her father, bound to her by blood, yet willing to sell her like property. Then she looked around at these women. Apache by birth, family by choice. She finally understood. Family was not shared ancestry. It was shared values, mutual respect, and loyalty freely given. By midday, the band was already moving again, following the ancient trails their people had walked for generations. Nyra Cade rode beside Zairn, steady now atop her own pony, a wedding gift from the band. The animal responded easily to her hands, as if recognizing her as one of its own. When they crested a long rise, the land opened before them. Endless prairie rolled outward like a sea of gold, grasses bending beneath the wind. Wildflowers scattered color across the earth, and above it all stretched a sky so vast it felt eternal. "It's beautiful," Nyra whispered. Zairn studied the horizon, his expression quiet but heavy. "This is what they would take from us," he said. "The white men keep pushing west, claiming land that cannot be owned." He gestured toward the open plain. "They fence what was meant to breathe." Nyra heard the worry beneath his words. This life, this freedom she had found, existed within a narrowing circle. Each year brought more settlers, more forts, more pressure on the old ways. "Whatever comes," she said firmly, "we face it together." Zairn reached across the space between their horses and took her hand. "Together," he agreed. They made camp that evening beside a clear running stream, the kind of place Zairn had taught her to recognize. Fresh water, natural shelter, open sight lines in case of danger. As Nyra helped raise their teepee, she marveled at how natural the movements felt now. Her hands knew the work. Her body had grown strong. Her mind had stretched wide enough to hold new skills, new language, new ways of seeing the world. After the evening meal, as stars pierced the darkening sky, Vorn, singing crow, called for stories. One by one, voices rose. Tales of hunts and journeys, of hardship survived, of wisdom earned. Then Vorn turned toward Nyra. "Viaka Win," he said formally. "You carry a story now. Will you share it?" All eyes settled on her. Once, such attention would have made her shrink inward, wishing herself invisible. Now she straightened her spine and lifted her chin. "I will tell of a woman who lived in a cage," she began. "A woman taught that walls meant safety and chains meant love." She spoke of fear, of obedience mistaken for virtue, of a cage growing smaller with each passing day. "She believed those lies," Nyra continued, "until the walls pressed too tight and the chains became too heavy to carry. So she ran. She told them everything. The flight across the prairie, the terror, the warrior who showed her that strength could be gentle. She spoke of learning to track and hunt, to scrape hides and stitch beadwork, of standing before her father and refusing his claim, of flood and gunfire, of saving and being saved. "Freedom," Nyra said at last, "is not only the absence of chains. It is the presence of choice. Every day this woman chooses to stay, to learn, to love, to defend the life she has built. And each day that choice makes her stronger." Silence followed, then nods, low murmurs of approval. She had spoken in the old way, turning the personal into something shared. Later, inside their teepee, Zairn drew her close. "You told our story beautifully," he said. Our story isn't finished, Nyra replied softly. It's just beginning. Then we will write it together, he said, day by day. They came together slowly, still learning one another, still honoring the trust that allowed such closeness. Nyra, who once believed a woman's duty was only to endure, learned she could ask, guide, respond. That intimacy could be mutual. That pleasure could belong to her too. Afterward, they lay entwined, listening to the quiet life of the camp. Dogs settling, distant voices of the night watch, the soft breathing of children. Safe sounds, home sounds. I used to dream of escape, Nyra murmured against his chest. Now I dream of staying, of children running free across this grassland, of growing old beside you, of becoming one of those women who teach the young ones to bead. These are good dreams, Zairn said, dreams worth fighting for. Will the hard times come? She asked quietly. Yes, he answered honestly. The white world presses closer every year, but we have survived hard seasons before. We will survive again. Nyra thought of the path that had brought her here. From a terrified woman fleeing Dry Creek Crossing to a wife lying peacefully in her husband's arms. Every step had required courage. That first desperate flight. The daily choice to trust, to learn, to believe she deserved more. Then we face whatever comes, she said, the way we face everything. Together. No cages for either of us. Only bonds freely chosen. Zairn's arms tightened around her. I will die before I let anyone cage you again, he vowed, and I will fight beside you to keep us both free. Nyra made her promise in return. Outside their teepee, the prairie wind sang its endless song. The stars wheeled overhead, the same stars that once witnessed her desperate escape, now shining above her chosen home. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, the movement of nomadic life, the work of survival, the growing shadow of a nation that did not understand this way of living. But tonight, Nyra Cade, Viaka Win, slept not as a woman fleeing the world, but as a woman who had finally found her place within it. Nyra Cade, feather woman, wife of Zairn, rested in the quiet certainty of love freely chosen and freely returned. She had learned to track game across open ground, to hunt, to soften hides beneath her hands, and to speak the Apache tongue with growing confidence. But more than skills, she had learned something far rarer. She had learned how to trust, how to choose, how to live unbound. The frightened woman who once fled Dry Creek Crossing would scarcely recognize the person she had become. That girl had lived in fear. She had believed marriage meant ownership, that obedience was safety, that a woman's voice was something to swallow and hide. She had been taught that wanting was shameful and silence was survival. This woman was different. This woman spoke her thoughts openly among the people. She rode her pony with steady skill across broken terrain. She could follow a deer's trail through stone and dust, or stand between danger and those she loved without hesitation. She understood now that true strength did not come from command or control. It came from standing side by side, from partnership, from choice renewed each day. Love, she had learned, was not a cage. It was wings. As sleep slowly claimed her, Nyra smiled. Tomorrow she and Zairn would ride once more toward the horizon, following the buffalo, guided by the land, fleeing nothing. Chasing only the promise of another sunrise lived freely. Whatever waited ahead, Fort Ash riders or wandering settlers, hunger or abundance, sorrow or joy, they would face it as equals, as partners, as two souls who had chosen one another and continued to make that choice with every dawn. The prairie wind whispered softly through the teepee walls, carrying dreams of open plains and moving herds, of children yet unborn who would walk between two worlds, strong in both. Dreams of a love that refused to be defined by fear or claimed by force. And somewhere within that wind, Nyra could have sworn she heard the cry of an eagle, wild and unbroken, soaring on currents no cage could ever hold. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Your presence means more than you know. If today's story awakened something inside you, don't let the trail end here. There are many more tales of courage, devotion, and faith waiting to be discovered. Subscribe, comment, share, and come back as we continue this unforgettable journey. Thank you, truly. Aviso legal barra disclaimer. All stories are intended solely for entertainment and may include fictionalized scenarios or dramatization derived from historical contexts. While AI assists in production, human creators supervise and adjust every piece to maintain sincerity, credibility, and emotional quality. We adhere entirely to platform regulations regarding AI content, ensuring no deepfakes or misleading portrayals. Licensed materials are used responsibly. Republishing, modifying, or extracting content without authorization is not allowed. We appreciate every viewer who respects originality and creative effort.